In this episode, we sit down with Bárbara González Briceño, a trailblazing entrepreneur and former CFO of Bitso, one of the most prominent crypto companies in Latin America. Bárbara shares her inspiring journey from growing up in a family of academics to becoming a key player in the fintech and sports media industries. Join us as Bárbara discusses the challenges and triumphs of her career, the importance of intentional sacrifices, and her vision for the future of sports entertainment in the region. Hi, Bárbara. Thanks for making it happen today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yes, no, I've been following Phillip's journey for a while now and thought it'd be great to reach out and have you share a little bit about the story and, of course, your path to founding Fillip. But before we start there, I'd love to learn a little bit about your background, your entrepreneurial days as maybe a child, a little bit about the family upbringing. Was there any entrepreneurship in your family that sparked this, or was it more traditional?
That's an interesting question. I was thinking about this before I got here today. And I think growing up, it's not that I saw that much of entrepreneurship around me, but I grew up in a family where it was full of academics. Everyone was like a nerd. And it was like the coolest thing that you could be in my family was like study and be a nerd and go after like go to a good school. And this is something where it's family with a very strong female side. Like there's so many women that have like a very strong academic background there, and most of them are teachers. So like being it was more on the service side, but than on the building a business side. But like all of them went to become like college professors. So it was. I think I grew up watching that, and for me became like the norm that I needed to go and study and do something with my life that was meaningful and impactful to future generations. So I think it was not that much that I saw entrepreneurship around me, but it was that I saw a lot of this like academic and service element that was there, and it really stuck me as I was growing up.
And was there one person in particular, like I do find a common thread, teachers or a parent or maybe a tia or tia mentor that like really guided you along your path, or was it just a culmination of everybody in your family?
I love speaking about my TS because my mom is part of a seven kid family, but five of them are my TS, and they were all like this like very strong female personalities. Each of them in their own field, but like they all hold PhDs and they're all like have this like big like jobs. And for me, growing up as a woman, particularly in Mexico, where that's not like I was privileged enough to have that example in my family. For me, it was like, oh, I need to be like them. So growing up, I remember not only watching them and being inspired by them, but I also remember like all of them like chiming in as I was deciding what I remember like prior to going to college, everyone was like, okay, everyone had an opinion of what I needed to do and what I needed to study and what I wanted to devote my life to. And that was like a very Latin thing and very Mexican where the family gets involved. But I had that with my TS. All like my cousins like all followed in the footsteps of the TS as well. So it was a very family thing. Like how you would design your professional life, like it was something that was something that of a lot of importance.
Did this create like a feeling of pressure or not really, like expectations?
Definitely, but
Yeah,
they do say that pressure is a privilege. So
yeah, they do.
I do think that for me at least, it definitely set the bar of the least that I need to achieve or strive to achieve. And I do think that it set the example for at least my generation of how hard we need to work. And that's a common theme that has continued all through my life. Like you have to work really hard for the things that you want to achieve. And I think in my case particularly, I remember like growing up and watching them and thinking, I want to be like a very successful professional. But then I also want to have a family, and what do I need to do? And what are the elements I need to bring into the mix to make sure that both things happen for me? Since very early, I remember like that was like my train of thought. Like, how will my decision making along my life make sure that I set up the stage for me to have both things? And this goes all the way from my high school years onto what I chose to do for college, onto what I did after college and what was like my first job. And it was always influenced on what will better help me like create like a of what I can achieve. And for me at that point, it was okay, I need to be like a straight student if I want to get to like the best program that I can. Then I have to study something that will probably open the doors for me for them to go to a better school. So I think it was like a chain of decisions that I had like planned like 10 years ahead. And thankfully, being worked out.
I was going to ask this later, but I think it's flowing now. When you think of like the balance of, in Mexico, there's like this very emphasis on family, and then there's like this extremely hard work culture, but it's really hard to balance both, especially as a female. Do you see that that was like in your family, like you had some examples, and how do you still do that today?
Oh, for sure. And I don't know if you know this about me, but I have 3 kids.
Oh, no, I didn't know, but now I know.
Yes, and 3 very young kids. I'm mom to 3 boys. They're 4, 3, and 1. So it's very intense. It also talks a lot about my personality and how intense I am about life. What you say is definitely true. Like I think this privilege that I had about like watching my tias as I grew up. I think for me it was always like it was what was expected of me. Like I never even considered this being either or. Whereas I think other people around me, particularly females, question this a lot. Like but it's impossible to have both things. And I think today, like I think that helped me a lot. Like growing up as I knew that it was possible because I had like very good examples of that being the case. But I think now that I've lived this for the past 5 years, my journey through like entrepreneurship and motherhood at the same time, it is challenging, but it is possible. Like I think there's the society in the country and like probably in the professional space is not set up for women to succeed, but things are changing. I think COVID helped a lot. I think in COVID enabled remote work for people, men and women, and or more flexibility. And I think that has been helpful. And I think in the end, like we're very lucky to be in a country where family gets very involved. Back to saying, so I get a lot of help from my mom, from my husband's mom, and I think that helps me a lot. But for me, it has become even like my mission to be example that you can do it and that I can be like a work parent where I can be successful in my career. And that doesn't mean that I'm neglecting my family life, but I can be successful in my family life without neglecting my professional development.
Is there like one piece of advice where you would say to like an aspiring entrepreneur that's a female, or even a person that's a male that wants to be very involved with their family? How do you balance it? If there's one thing that you would say.
Yeah, the one advice I would say is you have to be very intentional about the sacrifices that you make, and then be very in both fronts. So for me, I always say that like I don't do breakfast, working breakfast, because like that's the time that I take my kids to school. And if you want to see me, you can see me after 9 a.m. once I've done like school drop off. And I also don't do anything at 7 p.m. because that's the time that I put them to bed. But if you want to have dinner with me at 8 p.m., like I'm all up for it. So I think I've been very intentional, like blocking the space that I really want to prioritize with my family. And the same side work. And sometimes, like, I don't know, like my sleep probably has been hindered, or I think it's a very intentional sacrifice in a way that then I don't feel like guilty or I don't feel regret about like, I'm not being able to work out as much as I want to. Well, yeah, but like I'm prioritizing work and
But you
family.
also have 3 children. You're running a company. You have a husband. Like something's got to give, right?
Something's gotta give.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Okay, so getting back into your college years, you studied here in Mexico. You studied finance economics. It seems clear that you knew earlier. You alluded to I needed to pick a major that I could get into that can make me have the right career path or excel forward. Do you want to share a little bit about that? And then why did you pursue an MBA? I didn't ask why you pursued it, where it was at. It was just more why an MBA.
Yes. So I think I always knew that if I wanted to have this like successful professional career, I needed to be the better prepared person in the room because I was going to be competing with probably like 10, like in a room with 10 people, like I was probably going to be the only woman. And in order for me to compete with 9 men, I need to be the better prepared person in the room. And that was always like my mentality as I was like growing up. And so I think for me, like the MBA was like, okay, if I want to go about like as I go in my professional career, like I need to have something that backs up like this preparation, this academic preparation that can really help me get a seat in the room. So I think the MBA was always for me that, and I was very lucky enough that I ended up doing it also at like probably one of the best schools in the world, and that it does help you. And I talk to female operators and entrepreneurs where they have this question whether they should pursue an MBA, and for me it's like it is a security blanket where it does get you in the room, and then you have to do the work after that. It does get you in the room, and for me today, it even helps me open a lot of doors. So I needed to get that. And I think back then, probably it was more how it used to work. But then I also didn't know better. But I thought the only way to get an MBA was if I did a investment banking or consulting. It used to be the case a lot. And I want to talk about this because like I share this widely with people where it's not the case today. I always urge people to not go into investment banking or not go into consulting because like there's 100 different things that you can do where you can learn more and you can be exposed to like growth opportunities and you can still get to a place where you earn, right? And for me, that's why I ended up studying finance because it was like, okay, I'm gonna do undergrad finance, I'm gonna go into investment banking, and then I'm gonna go and pursue my MBA. And it was like always a plan. And I learned tons, and I think that it's a very good school being investment banking and consulting the same. And I think it created a lot of the basis of how to be a very good professional and how to work and the discipline and the quality and the attention to detail. However, it's very different to operating. And once you like dive into the operating world, like you're never going back because it has nothing to do. Like it's phenomenal to be an operator. So I talk to a lot of I do a lot of like mentoring to young people, and I usually tell them like if you can go into like an early stage startup or like something that is fast growing, like go there because it's gonna push you so much outside of your comfort zone. Where the learning that you're gonna get probably one that you are not foreseeing, but then you're gonna be like stretched into places that you don't even know, and probably one day the challenge is gonna be like we ran out of toilet paper, but then the next one, the other day, it's like, hey, we need to present to investors, and you're going to be the same person if you're in an early stage startup, like you're doing both things. So I think it's a great preparation for people who want to go and pursue a degree.
I agree completely. Would you also say it's different now? Maybe 10 years ago, the ecosystem wasn't as big in Mexico when you were at Lazard, but now there's many more startups, many more opportunities, a lot of people hiring remotely because of COVID. Do you want to touch on that?
No, for sure. I think COVID changed the game. I mean, macro environment, rates were very low, investors have more appetite for risk. US is very saturated, and then COVID hit, and you get a. It's the first time in history where US and international capital starts flowing into the region in the dimension that it started flowing to the region, and also like just the remote aspect of it really had to do with it because before, if you wanted to raise money, you would have to go and hop on a plane and do a roadshow and get the meetings, whether you were going to New York or San Francisco and getting the intros. And now, in one single day, from the comfort of your living room, you can be taking 15 different meetings via Zoom. So I think that virtuous cycle that started in COVID, where capital flew into the region, then for aspiring entrepreneurs, where before the cost of opportunity of leaving a high paying job or like a traditional CPG, consulting, banking job to be an entrepreneur was very high because there was no capital. So even if you were like the smartest, the hardest working, and had the best idea, if capital wasn't there, it was very hard to succeed. And then all of a sudden, you have all this capital flowing in, and all these like brilliant people with a lot of solutions to very important problems in the region can go in and like try to solve all these issues. So I think the more entrepreneurs that start like leaving these jobs and like attempting to build something, the more capital starts like this virtual cycle. And today, the amount of like the maturity and depth of the landscape is such that there's like opportunities are like so abundant, and for every single like a function, every single seniority, like people can go and learn and so there's it's so rich, and I think it's definitely it has changed, and I think today the cost of opportunity is not only for the ones starting the business, but also if you're like graduating from college and you're debating whether to join a traditional company or like investment banking or consulting or a startup, like the opportunities are there. And I mean, it's so fantastic to see that now playing out.
And I would also add that the resources are there too. Like as I've observed when I came down to Mexico, my wife's from Monterrey, by the by the way, so that's how I came down here. And basically, what I realized was there's so many resources now that are in Spanish about the whole startup ecosystem, whether it comes from like what is venture capital, what is a safe, all these instruments like that, where maybe 10 years ago, it wasn't the same. So someone who's not from the right university or right, maybe track, it's a little harder to raise your first 250,000 because you don't know what to do.
Totally. And I think now it also one of the things that happens in the the entrepreneurial landscape is that there's a lot of solidarity from entrepreneurs themselves. So it's not only that like now there's information, but there's also now a community that also like carries you through your process. So I always say that when you're building a business, you feel like no one has ever had the problem that you have and that you're like drowning in a glass of water. And all of a sudden you reach out and you figure out that there's a very wide network of people who've been through the problem that you've already gone through. And so it's easier for you to learn from them and everyone's willing to help. I think everyone wants like new companies to succeed. Everyone is like funding each other, recommending people. You see, the PayPal mafia, and then you now it's like here in Latam we have now the Rappi mafia, and seeing the Bitso mafia, and you have like all these companies that now everyone's like staying the same ecosystem. And I have this theory like we're about to see like a new generation of companies being built by second time founders or second time operators where they learned so much in the past few years that all these learnings and all these maturity is going to come into play in these new second time businesses that I think these are the businesses that are going to like blow it out of the park.
No, I couldn't agree with you more that we're entering in this new phase of like the next, you could say maybe on the verge of like some type of golden era into Latam. And I think that was a great segue into Bitso. So Bitso obviously is very prominent, almost I would say probably one of the most prominent crypto Web3 companies. How did this opportunity come up post MBA for you? And it'd be
Yeah.
great for you to share a little bit about your experience and maybe one or two things you took away from that.
I mean, Bitso, as I always say, Bitso is my baby and I love it forever and dearly. So I was doing my MBA and mid through my second year, I realized that I wanted to build something that had an impact in the world. Like I realized that just being an advisor or being a third party or like being an investor was not fulfilling enough for me. So I wanted to do something that had meaning. And as I started like talking to different startups, one of the like very important aspects of my decision was I wanted to be part of a team of incredible people who not only were smart, but were also like very driven and committed to the mission, but also like they shared a very similar moral compass to the one that I had. At some point, I get to meet Daniel, the founder and CEO, and it was very like that story still sticks in my mind because I remember like I was coming in from like a very like financial. I was like all in a suit up and heels, and I came to this like very cliche startup office where there were like 15 people, and it was like literally like plastic tables and chairs, and I meet this individual who is convinced that he's going to change the financial infrastructure of the Latin American market. And he's going to do it through this technology called blockchain and crypto. And this mission of making like crypto useful at that moment was so endearing. And for me, I really quickly like drank the Kool-Aid and realized that I wanted to be part of the team that was really attempting to do that change. And for me, what I was really looking for was like an opportunity to step outside my comfort zone. And I realized that this is a business that if it doesn't work, imagine my next interview when I'm going for a job is like, I tried to build a crypto company in Latam. It's going to be fascinating. So I was not that worried about the downside scenario. And the upside scenario was like, oh, this is going to be like out of proportion. I think if we like back then, it's a moment where capital's not there. No one's investing in Latam. Crypto is still very dodgy for a lot of people. People don't necessarily believe that crypto is going to change the world. And then I'm coming back from my MBA and no one's understanding why I'm joining this like 50 people startup. Startups are not a thing yet.
And at
And
that point, was there runway? Was there a Series A or a seed round? Or I
so
should have known.
there had been a seed round, seed, and I get there. I started the CFO, and then I literally signed my offer at the high of the 2017 bubble, and then everything collapses. And I'm a very committed individual, so for me, it was like I already said yes. So regardless of the collapse, like I'm going in. And for the first 18 months, I didn't see the market move positively one single day. And I still remember vividly because I remember that the first day that the market moved upward, the chief legal officer and I It went to have sushi to celebrate that it was the first time that we had seen a positive market. And it was extremely challenging because I got to a company at a moment where market wasn't there. Although there was product market fit, there was a there wasn't any volume in the platform because like people were not trading. Think about like the time where Bitcoin is at like $3,000. It's like really, really like every single day. It's like, whereas you don't like runway is running out. I'm responsible for runway because I'm the CFO, and raising money is very challenging because like you don't have traction in the platform, part of the world where people don't invest in. You are in a space where people don't want to touch, and you have like all these chances. And by the way, like the central governments are trying to shut you down. And it was like such an uphill battle those 18 months. But interestingly, so those are like the 18 months I remember with the most love, and the ones where I think that I grew the most. Because usually we grow in situations that are adverse and not necessarily when everything's going right. So that's where I learned the most. That's where I got stretched the most. That's the first time that I realized what operating was. And I think the question for me in my mind was like, okay, how is this different to the job that I was used to doing at investment banking? And it's like, why was I like concerned about like nuances such as like EBITDA margins or like percentage growth, where like I'm concerned with like payroll. Like I want to make sure that I can pay people who work here. And you start realizing when operating, like there's bigger fish to fry than just like the report. And I think it was a fantastic year. And then all of a sudden, like COVID hit and things started getting better. And guess what? Like our platform, like we had invested so much in regulation and making sure that we had the right framework for a company's scale, that when the market got to the place that we wanted, we were there ready. And we were able to capture all the value that was up for grabs. And we became the like undisputed market leader, not only here, but in the other countries as well. So it was and from there, I mean, it's such a blur because it happened so quickly. But we went from having almost like no traction at all up to December 2019 and no regulatory framework to being a multi-billion company in May 2021. So the growth was very quickly. And in the end, like, I think being part of this so committed, incredibly smart, morally driven, and very mission driven team, I think was an experience of a lifetime. And I think that's where I fell in love with what building a business means. And yeah, and it was a phenomenal experience. But at some point, I realized I want to build again. And I wanted, yeah. And
No, and you could probably do a whole episode just on Bitso and the experience, but we're not here for that the whole time. So it is somewhat foreseeable and logical, this transition from one operating company to another, but going from a Web3 finance company to now media sports, like I'm all for it. I'm all about sports entertainment, but it seems like a big leap. At the time, what was the consensus? What was your contrarian thesis around this? And like, were your friends backing this? Family saying, "Oh, this is a great idea. I'm going to go start a company and buy IP and entertainment and sports," or was it not that way?
so, so think about my setting where I was 6 years at a crypto company. So I was always a contrarian. No one ever backed me to be in a crypto. So I'm already used to being the odd person who wanted to do something that nobody understood. And I think being at a crypto company at that moment in time, I think it also removed a lot of the fears that one has as when you start to build a business. And I realized one of the things that I learned is like, you really need to be like enamored with what you're building. And it really needs to be so much fun. And if you're not waking up every single day excited to go to the office to really develop what you're working on, then you're not at the right place. And for me, I knew that whatever came next needed to be exciting and fun. And the bar was really high. So as I was like debating like what was like the next industry that I wanted to dive into, I knew that I was not going to build anything in Web3. Bitso's it's still my baby, and like there was no way I was going to do something in a competing space, and like all my exposure was there, and I continued to be very close to the company. So I knew it was something different. I wanted something with less regulation, in all honesty. I think the regulatory piece is very burdensome as you're building a business, and I wanted something that could be easier to build in that sense. And one thing that I had learned was the power of in the end, regardless of whether it's sports, crypto, or consumer goods, like building a strong brand, like that's what consumers are for. So I was like thinking and debating where I went, and I realized all my life was like work, have kids. And the only spare time that I had for myself, I spent it watching sports. Why? Because I grew up at in a household where my dad, my sister, and I would sit down and watch any sport you can think of. My husband and I, all our rituals are around watching sports as well. And I love and enjoy watching sports. My kids watch sports with me. My 3-year-old, every day he wakes up and asks me, "Mom, is there a tennis match today or a race?" And because he loves sitting down and really instead of watching like Paw Patrol or Spider-Man, like we watch tennis. So I knew that that's where I realized, maybe I should do something in the sports space. Like it's a market that has received so much capital in like globally in the last few years. However, in Latin America, it's still untapped because sports properties are still held, are still very unmodified, on-prem. They're properties that have not gone through the digitization process where they have been on the same hands for like probably decades. So they're run in a very old fashioned way. They're not institutional businesses, most of them, because like, again, they're family run. There's a whole opportunity to go after these businesses and probably like you have generational changes where you can find some opportunities of like diving in and getting some of these family businesses that have very strong intellectual property tied to them. And they already have like audiences that follow them and that are like, are completely excited about the product that they offer. But then you can professionalize that into building a business that is a way easier to monetize and then it's easier to scale. So I was thinking about sports. I decided I really wanted to go to sports. Everybody thought that I was crazy. Every thought like it was a for like 6 months before I left Bitso, I was already telling people that I was going into sports, and people did think that I was crazy. And all of a sudden, I met Alberto and Hugo, my partners, and it just felt like serendipity when like they already were thinking about building a business in sports, and it was like made this is made to happen, and that was the moment that it was very easy for me to say this is where I'm going to spend the next cycle of my career, and now I'm here. And today I think we have a very disrupting business that it's paying attention to all these businesses that have asymmetries between monetization and audience, but that no one is paying attention to and figuring out how to grow them and put them into a platform where we have a lot of leverage to make sure that we can grow the different revenue streams that they have. And yeah, we're having tons of fun.
Couldn't be more of a fan or believer in that, because recently I just saw the Querétaro soccer team was bought by the first group of American investors. I'm like, oh no, here come the floodgates. So now, if you want to say like, what is Fillip, and then we could get into some more questions about how you guys evaluate companies, what areas you're most excited in. But from my understanding, when I look at it, it's a holding company, but is it really in between like a venture investor and a PE investor? Explain it. I'm sure many people ask, but I tried my best to understand.
Everyone. No, yeah, everyone asks that. And we like to see ourselves as a holding company because we really dive into operating the businesses. Like we don't like to see ourselves as a fund because one, we really like to dig deep into how the ins and outs of the business and take the reins. It's not only about like putting money somewhere, but like it's more about like, okay, we want to now make sure that we are the ones steering the future of the business that we're holding. Second, we don't have investment horizons. We're not here for the exit. We want to make sure that we're a long-term partner with the business and that we want to build brands and properties that are really here to capture the next decades of fans that want to be following that property. We really our whole corporate structure is set up as a company. Like we're not fund like where we have LPs and then so it's an equity. Like we like to think more of ourselves as a similar to a TKO or an ABG where they're holding companies and they're like building all these ecosystems within them. So what we're trying to do in the Fillip side is that we're trying to build this ecosystem of properties that have a very strong cultural connection to regions of the world, particularly here in Latin America, where they're already widely consumed. However, they're very poorly monetized. And this is happening in tons of properties where for decades long or centuries, like they've been very followed, but they're not at a place where the business has followed the developing trends of digitalization or monetization. And now it's harder for these monies to operate in a very profitable manner. Now, as we were like analyzing the sports and entertainment businesses, we realized that they all have like the same revenue levers. The first one, they all make money from media deals. Like they all make a lot of money. Like an important part of P&L is based on selling their content to streamers or traditional TV. So that's one piece. The second piece is they all make money from sponsorships. Sponsors play a very important role in how these brands connect to the audience. Third, live events and everything that revolves around live events, all the way from ticketing to selling food and beverage. And then that connects to like the fourth one, which is merchandising and licensing. So you want, if you're a consumer, if you have a very good product that you can sell to streamers and TV, most likely sponsors will want to be sponsoring that in that product. And then once you have the live events that you're going to be filming to then stream, people are going to go to the stadium or to the arena or to the hall to consume that product. And then if they love the product, once they get out, how do you continue the journey? By selling them t-shirts, caps, cups. That's how you connect. So they all have these four pieces. So what we're doing is that, okay, what if we bring in-house all the capabilities of exploiting each of the different fronts? And then we built like this plug and play infrastructure where any property that comes into the ecosystem, they can just now leverage our licensing arm, they can leverage our content production arm, they can leverage our sponsorship team, and that way we can really enhance and create value in a faster way that if we were to start from scratch every time a property comes into the space.
Yeah. Before we get into a little bit of the portfolio, which is consists of some very impressive brands, if you had to answer this, why do you think media and sports, while there's a lot of massive relevance in the culture, do you think it's so undervalued or behind from the monetization side? Is it just because of the family businesses that are long legacy owned, or is there other things?
So I think it's not necessarily under monetized everywhere in the world. I think there are places of the world where it has been catching up in the last few years. And I think today what we see in Latin America is that trends are shifting, right? And if you see particularly of how people consume this media, it used to be all through traditional channels, TV channels, where the power of negotiation was held between very small number of players and particularly two different players. Right? And all you could think whoever had content rights to sell, they didn't have a lot of leverage because like there were two players who were consuming that content. Nowadays, if you go and see the landscape, now you have all these set of like streamers with paywalls where now it's not only two, but now you have like seven different people that you can sell your content to, and that people will pay to see to consume that content. So there's more leverage coming in that these properties can actually benefit from, and they can have stronger negotiation positions that can equate their rights value to ones or in Europe or the. But now there's a third piece where now sports entertainment consumption is moving into the free model where now you have Twitch and YouTube and you have all these different streamers that are like streaming these content for free. Whereas before it used to be behind paywalls. And that starts also shifting the paradigms of how media is consumed. So I think it's more to do with like these trends and how this like ecosystem has evolved. And today we're seeing that Latin America is catching up, and we see things like the success of Casa TV in Brazil or what Kings League has built and with United. But like now the models have been disrupted, and now you're bringing hundreds of millions of people who want to consume content into these new platforms. And I think all the economics are being redistributed. So I think that's why there's a lot of under monetization still at play to be taken and to be grabbed. So I think those are like one of the main dynamics playing out today in the sports entertainment sectors. And
I read something that was a while ago that Gen Z, like there was a survey and they basically said how they consume their content, not just sports, so a little bit general, but they're totally fine waiting and clicking through and finding the free version. Like they don't want to pay. And I think that's what you're hitting at is because the next generation is fine clicking out 18 different buttons of some illegal stream because they don't want to pay.
No, totally. And we're seeing that in Kings League, investors in the Kings League. And one of the things that of how that model came about is that we realized that Gen Z today not only doesn't mind clicking 18 times, they don't even want to stand up from their bed and go to a living room and watching the like family TV. They want to be in their bed and their phone consuming the content that they want. And probably they're watching two things at once, so they're like going from one to another. And that, like, in terms of like sports particularly, their attention span is it's limited. So they will not sit down to watch a 4 hour match or a 90-minute soccer match, right? Like they
90
want
baseball
something.
game. Tough.
No, oh no,
I barely make it through and I'm a baseball fan.
imagine. So they want to consume content. They still love the sport, but they want to consume it differently. So at least what we've realized in Kings is what if we give them content that's shorter, more dynamic, one where they feel like the rules are more exciting. They're similar to more to video games where it's like it's a generation that's playing a lot of video games. And then you give it to them through their favorite streamers. So if you're instead of watching like a general broadcast from the Kings League account, they love watching it through the lens of their particular streamer that they follow. And now they can consume it in YouTube or Twitch for free. And what we're seeing is that some matches have the same audiences that other soccer matches in, I don't know, in Brazil or in the UK, which are like the countries that have like the largest soccer following in the world. And this is an amateur league, there's seven league. So I don't know, like we were seeing semifinals of the World Cup of Nations, the Kings League had 3 million uh, 3 million concurrent viewers at the same time. And you see last week's Fulminense's semifinal in the World Cup of Clubs traditional soccer. It also had around 4 million. We're operating in very similar metrics where this new disruptive way of watching the same sport with the same ball now is consumed in a completely different manner, but the same amount of people.
Okay, so Fillip's portfolio consists of Lucha Libre, Kings League, Tycoon Enterprises. What's the unifying thread across these holdings, and how did you guys kind of see a common theme?
We're trying to build an ecosystem of sports entertainment properties that have a very huge potential of being revamped or institutionalized to make sure that we can capture growth that's happening in the industry. And as we were like investing and assessing the investment portfolio, we realized that most sports entertainment companies have the same revenue levers in basically every single one of the companies that operate in the space, which are all of them have very strong sponsorship components. So having a very strong commercial arm is very important. The second one is all the live event aspects of like ticketing and food and beverage and like everything that happens once you arrive at a venue. And then third, once you have like a very good product that's live where people attend to, and then you have all the sponsors showing there, you want to stream that content. So like there's a whole element of putting your content out there and selling it to to streamers, media streamers, and both open TV or free access channels like YouTube and Twitch, or through some of the like main streamers like Prime or Netflix. And then once you have that, then you want to continue the engagement with the fan. So you want to do like licensing and merchandising, where once the fan exited the venue and once they have pressed pause on the stream, they want to consume your content still. So like they want to go and they want to have like the T-shirt and they want to have the cap and they want to have brushed their teeth with the favorite character toothbrush. And so as we were assessing all these, we realized that it would be easier for us to like bring some of those capabilities in-house, so we can service the portfolio companies better. So we could like create this like flywheel where it's just plug and play every time we invest in a new company. So today we have four different companies within the portfolio. The first two like properties are Kingsley and AAA. And then from the capability side, we bought the largest licensing agent in Latam, which is called Tycoon Enterprises. And then we did a JV with Box to Box Productions to produce sports content in Latin America. And Box to Box are the ones who produce Drive to Survive. And we all know how that turned out. Like
Yeah.
literally part of the business success was because of the content that was generated by this production company, and that they started indoctrinating and new audiences, and that actually like they expanded the reach of the product. They brought in audiences that had never even ventured into like turning on a TV on a Sunday to watch a race, and now they do so because like they like engage with the storytelling and with the characters and with like the drama. So what if we did the same thing for our portfolio company? So we're now producing content through our box to box JD, and we have a phenomenal team there as well. So right now, this flywheel is starting to work very nicely, and we're starting to see how we can cross leverage these properties between each other, and how not only properties that we own as part of the ecosystem, but also like brands that probably Tycoon represents. Maybe
Yeah.
they're a good option to produce content on, or maybe they want to do like cross collaboration with the
Right.
AAA or with Kings League. So I think we're starting to see like a very neat a dynamic where these theoretical flywheel that we wanted to pursue is actually happening, and it's very exciting. And now we just need to keep on bringing the properties so we can like start the enhancement process.
Yeah. Drive to Survive. I said to someone recently, F1, the movie, like I would have never watched it 5 years ago. Now I
Yeah.
go. My wife's like, I want to go back twice. I'm like, I don't know why. It
Yeah,
was a great movie. Anyway,
it
so
is.
as we keep going here, what gives you confidence that this is the right time? You know, like people always ask me, not only in tech, but other like, why Mexico? Why Latam now? People said it was 10 years ago. What do you think has changed the last, I should say, 5, 10 years?
Yeah, so I think for Latin America, I think COVID changed the game. It started this virtuous cycle where as capital flew into the region, we started seeing all this like potential entrepreneurs that had been. I don't know if we spoke about this in the prior questions, but uh, we have this like set of potential entrepreneurs that were usually in this very traditional jobs where the cost of opportunity of leaving a
Mm,
very traditional
yeah,
job is very high. And all of a sudden, as capital is now like turning into the region, then the alternative of actually leaving the traditional jobs and traditional high paying jobs to go in and venture into trying to find a solution to one of the like millions of problems
yeah,
that the region has, it's very appealing. And I think the more entrepreneurs that we have, it's easier to bring more talent, like brilliant talent and hardworking talent out of these companies into like trying to find these solutions. And that brings more capital. So we have like this virtual cycle. So I think the startup ecosystem boom that happened since COVID in Latam, I think it's there. It went through its ups and downs as the whole world, with a 2022 and 23 being a bit more chaotic, but I think now it's in a very healthy moment. And then in terms of sports and entertainment particularly, I think there has been a lot of capital flowing into these industries across the world, but there hasn't been that much flowing into Latin. In Latin America, I have this dynamic where these properties are usually family owned. They have been like seen more as trophy assets more than business venues. So I think there's a whole array of great assets out there that actually have like a good connection with the public, because we are very emotional. For us, like watching sports is more about like the family aspect of like
yeah,
getting together and meeting on a Saturday and going to the stadium. It's very passionate. Like Mexicans and Latin Americans are very passionate about their sports, particularly around soccer. And I think you have those dynamics where there's a willingness to pay to go and like experience that type of entertainment. And I think so. We think that there's a huge opportunity of finding this asset where the asymmetry between audience and monetization is there, meaning that they already have like a like a captive audience. They've already have an ingrained brand with like the culture and the families, and people already have like a recognize very strongly these teams, brands, leagues, whatever. But given the corporate structures that these companies have followed, or because like there hasn't been institutionalization, or they haven't digitized to like the current trends, there hasn't been the appropriate amount of monetization of these businesses. So I think that's the type of business that we're looking for. Uh, like last but not least, we're in a moment in time where technology is changing the name of the game for absolutely everything. And there's this theory where things like sports are going to be one of the few things that remain real. We won't know what is real and what's not in a few years, but then there's this theory that people will want to engage with sports and live events much more because like it's a connection to reality.
Yeah.
Like, it's what's left. So I think
It's our last
we're
frontier.
literally. So I think that's also part of what these ecosystem is looking.
Last few thoughts here. As you look at sports or any kind of entertainment sector or type of business in Latin America or Mexico, where do you think are opportunities are being overlooked and why so?
Female sports, really. And it's not because I'm like a very avid feminist, but it's true. We're starting to see how audiences in this sports are there, but then sponsors are still overlooking them, media streamers are still overlooking them. We just had the Euro in tournament, and the amount of attendance to stadiums. They had over 700,000 attendees over the course of the
Yeah.
tournament to filling stadiums. They had, I think, over 5 million different viewers in the I think semifinal and final
Yeah.
match of the tournament. So I think the audience is there. They're starting as we are seeing some companies or institutions starting to invest and really position female sports a different product. Like it's not a variant of male sports. It's just a different product, and where it has to be positioned differently to a different audience. I think we're starting to see a huge growth, and that's happening across the board. It not only is happening in soccer, as I mentioned, with the Euro, but it's happening in, for example, in tennis.
Yeah.
We have had, I think, 3 years in a row where the audience for the U.S. Open final, a female U.S. Open
Really?
final, has
Yeah.
been larger than the audience for the
Yeah.
male
Huge.
final.
Yeah, huge Sabalenka fan. I love watching her. She's so strong, and so it's amazing. But
Oh
yeah,
yes,
yeah, yeah. It's
but I'm a fan. So I mean, tennis is my
yeah,
weak
yeah,
spot, but
yeah,
and I love her. But
yeah.
yeah, so we're starting to see this. So I think that's overlooked, and
Mhm.
we're gonna see how in the next few years, I think that's gonna take over the world by storm.
Yeah. Okay.
So very very bullish on women's
Yeah.
sports.
Okay. So, what makes a great investor, and then what trait do you think a founder need, or all founders need? Those are quick two hits.
So for founders, the answer is resilience. Like you have to be resilient because thing like being an entrepreneur, it's so hard. It's like full of downs and then there's some ups, but like it's full of downs most of the time. And like getting out of bed and putting your like positive face on to go and motivate a team to keep on working like 16 hours a day, 7 days a week to make sure that you can like put whatever you're building in front of your end customer and navigating through adversity. And it's always easier to question yourself, say like, I could just be in like a 9 to 5 job in a
Yeah. What
CPG
am I
company and
doing?
what am I doing? So I think you have to be very resilient and you have to learn to to really extract the best out of like the adversity moments and then put them and capitalize them in the one moments are fantastic. And there's this phrase about not being like managing defeat and success equally. Like the Stoics talk about like that. And I think that's part of the essence of being an entrepreneur because you can never get ahead of yourself. Like you can never get too excited because there's like so many other challenges. But then you have to keep going even when times are rough. So I think resilience. And I think on the investing side, probably like being opportunistic is very important. I think
Yeah.
definitely like there's a lot of frameworks to follow, rules to stick to. Different funds, different companies have different ways of how they make decisions about how to allocate capital. However, you have to keep an eye for opportunities that maybe are gonna not fit the mold, not abide by all the things that you've deciphered, but the reality is that there's still gonna be great opportunities and like knowing when to trust your gut and these opportunities is also very important. So like keeping that flexibility of mind, I think it's crucial.
Last question. What do you wish you spent more time doing outside of work?
Being with my kids, for sure. They're growing up so fast. I think that having a full-time job, both at home and at the office, is tough. And so I think I sometimes wish I had more hours to just like be with them and cherish this
Yeah.
time as they're growing up.
Awesome. Thanks a bunch for making this happen, Barbara. We'll be in touch, but I appreciate you making the time, and it was a blast hearing your story and listening to Philip.
Thank you so much for having me. It was
Yes,
very
of
interesting.
course.
I love the conversation.
Yes, appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's a wrap on this episode of Cut the Check, presented by VCMX. If you enjoyed this conversation, I would really appreciate it if you subscribed and leave a review. It really helps more founders and investors discover the show. You can find me on LinkedIn at MacMeyer or check out my website at macmeyer.com for more insights on startups, venture capital, and the Latin America ecosystem. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you next week.